Good evening. Thank you, Dave. I'm Councillor Stuart Jeffrey, Leader of the Council, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the Cabinet. May I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated, and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the Council, but if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know? I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. Is anyone planning to record the meeting? Excellent. Item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies? I don't think there are. Full house. Item 2, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 3, notification of visiting members. I can see a couple of people in the audience. Would you like to come and say hello? And which item you want to talk on, obviously.
Councillor Russell, item 22.
Councillor Parfitt, just observing.
Thank you both. Disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? No? Okay. Item 5, disclosures of lobbying. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? Nope. Item 6. To consider whether items should be taken in private because of possible disclosure of exempt information. I move that all items be taken in public. However, if members wish to discuss the information contained within the exempt appendices to item 23, the Council House Building Programme, it will be necessary to move into the closed session due to the likely disclosure of exempt information for the reasons specified, having applied the public interest test. Is this agreed? Thank you. Item 7, minutes of the meeting held on 19th of March. I move that the minutes of the meeting on the 19th of March 2024 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Item 8 is presentation of petitions. There are no petitions this evening. Item 9, questions from local residents to the leader or individual cabinet member. I've received notification that Kate Hammond wishes to ask a question of myself. Kate, do you want to come up?
Good evening. Please could you confirm how much has been spent on the Lenham Heathlands Garden Settlement Project since the 1st of April 2024?
Thank you, Kate. Since that date, £97,981 has been spent by the Council on work associated with the Heathlands Garden community. Kate, do you wish to ask a supplementary question arising out of your original question or the reply?
Yes, please. The Council's budget has £1.2 million set aside this municipal year to continue developing Heathlands. Given your new administration's lukewarm reception of the Heathlands proposals and the absolute importance of spending taxpayers' money wisely, will you commit to reinstating the Heathlands Progress Report to all future overview and scrutiny committee meetings to give members and residents sufficient opportunity to scrutinise the plan?
Thank you. Sorry, just taking a little bit of background there. So I understand that the Heathlands Progress Report came to Cabinet rather than overview and scrutiny. I'm very keen that it comes regularly. Well, work out how often that needs to be. But yeah, I'm keen that we make as much in public as we can in terms of progress. So thank you. Right, I think that's all the questions, isn't it? Yes. Item 10, questions from members to the leader or cabinet members. I don't have any questions from members. Item 11, matters referred to the cabinet by another committee for reconsideration. There are none. Item 12 is items arising from overview and scrutiny. There are none. Item 13, matters referred to the cabinet by any other committee. There are none. Item 14, any matter relating to a serious service failure or nuisance. Again, there are none. Item 15, receipt of written representations from members of the council. There are none. Okay, so item 16 is the cabinet forward plan. Do members have comments on the forward plan? Councillor English.
At some point in the forward plan, we're probably going to have to discuss the issue of garden waste bins and the issue of whether or not there should be a refund issue. So I think it will need to be in the forward plan for discussion with a number of possible options.
Thank you. Anyone else got anything to raise on the forward plan? Just to, I suppose, to say it's obviously our first forward plan at this meeting. There's quite a lot of items on it, and I'm expecting lots more to go on. But it'll evolve quite rapidly, I suspect, over the next couple of months. But thank you, Clive. We'll make sure that the garden bins report goes on there. So on that basis, is this report noted? Thank you. Item 17, fourth quarter finance performance and risk monitoring report. Councillor Cox, the Cabinet Member for Corporate Resources, I think this is over to you to present.
Thank you, Chair. So the fourth quarter finance performance and risk monitoring report for 22-23 is as at 31st of March, and obviously is backward looking in that respect. The policy and advisory committees have considered this in terms of budget performance and risk monitoring within their respective remits. It sets out the financial performance and risk position to the end of the financial year 23-24, and it therefore covers the final year of the previous administration. There are now 3 PACs, policy advisory committees rather than 4, with different areas of responsibility, and for convenience, this report covers the areas for which the new PACs are responsible and reports performance as though the existing allocations had been in effect last year. 3 headline points just to mention is that we were within budget in the last financial year, that there had been some overspend in some areas, but those were countered by underspend in others. And really just a word to be aware and an element of caution for this financial year, because as we all know, there's a large amount of change that could come our way, including some external factors. The outturn for the financial year was an underspend of 22,000 net, and the details of that are detailed in the report. Overspends, most notably of 971,000 for temporary accommodation, was offset by a drawdown of the contingency budget of 1.871 million, and additional interest and investment income of 0.929 million, and a range of underspends elsewhere. There is no budget as such yet for this financial year we're in, with a focus being on the corporate strategy and the medium-term financial strategy, and that's a core part of the programme that we're working on. There's no updated budget, just seeing your face, thank you. This is the key word. For the current financial year of 24-25, an additional amount of 450 has been built in, 450,000 has been built in for temporary accommodation. While this is not as much as last year's overspend, we're seeing numbers in temporary accommodation stabilise, and the financial burden for the council is reducing steadily as we start the journey of acquiring our own properties rather than having to rely on expensive nightly paid accommodation. Capital expenditure has lagged behind projections, and this is mainly because of slippage on the council's housing programme. The unspent budget will be carried forward and utilised in 24-25 and further years. The report also deals with council tax and business rates collection, reserves and balances and treasury management. Note that reserves remain comfortable but not at excessive levels, and total borrowing amounts to 45 million. Most of the borrowing is still to be deployed for capital investment, leaving 33 million which we are holding in terms of short-term investment. In terms of performance indicators, these can be found in Appendix 2, and these show performance against those KPIs. Part A shows the position for quarter 4, Part B for the year as a whole, and there's explanations for the underperformance given in the report. UK Shared Prosperity Fund is in Appendix 3, and it sets out the progress with projects financed through that fund. Drawing your attention to business rates write-off, there is a recommendation in Appendix 4 that 2 debts for outstanding business rates be written off. The processes that we have applied to those debts are extensive and considered exhaustive, which is why they're recommended for write-off. Appendix 5 gives an update on corporate risks and includes a summary of the corporate risk register too. In terms of recommendations, you are recommended to note the various contents of the report and recommend to Cabinet that it writes off the business rates set out in Appendix 4 as mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Mark, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I've nothing to add.
Thank you. Questions from members? Councillor Thompson? Councillor English then? I don't mind, one of you.
It's not so much a question as an observation, I suppose. This is a snapshot of where we were, and a fairly accurate one. But of course, if you look beneath the surface, some of these figures are, shall we say, choppy, and the average represents a serious difference in performance over a period of time. So you get the average. I suspect the next quarter will also show averages which were, not too difficult to be quite happy about, but which will hide quite a variation in performance, particularly in my own portfolio in relation to the refuge collection service. One can expect that an average, which may well be perfectly acceptable over the quarter, will actually hide quite a nuanced performance. So just a note of caution that KPIs only show a certain level of information, however good the KPI is. And also a snapshot in time. If you look at some of the wording in here around the housing programme, some of the comments were very accurate when the report was written, but things have moved on in relation to some projects. So they're literally a snapshot, which is accurate at the time, but doesn't necessarily show us the way forward. And it's the trend over a period of time, rather than a single KPI, that's probably important.
Thank you. I'm assuming you're referring to the comments under 6.4, which suggests there's no clarity on the way forward for Maidstone East. I think they're probably, that was, as you say, correct at a point of time. Hopefully things will start to move forward quite quickly. Good. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. We are keen, of course, to support good work done by the previous council, officers and members, and we want to show our engagement with the existing programme and its seamless transition into the programme that we wish to implement shortly. We're not here to talk about that particularly, but as you know, I've asked some questions about several of the details in the fourth quarter finance performance risk report, and there's some answers to that that I think is important to share. Thank you, Councillor English, for passing on questions to Officer Jen Stevens. You will notice on page 59 it says that the target was missed by more than 10% for contamination. There's an error on that page. Officer Stevens says that the 24.3% against target of 6 should read the same as the figure in the table. I believe that's the 7.38, so the 24.3 was incorrect. So it's not as bad as it looks. That's an important correction, so I'm happy to pass that on. She confirmed that there was monitoring of how much recycling was wasted, but importantly, and residents will be keen to hear, that Jen Stevens wants to clarify that there was not global mixing of different sorts of waste in the catch-up services. This was often alleged during the earlier stages of the late collections, missed collections, so she was keen to point that out, so I think that's an important clarification. On page 48, it mentions that a proportion of the new vehicles were not delivered. She tells me that within 3 weeks of the contract start that those vehicles have all now been taken on and are now in operation. The reporting process on the so-called EPR payments on recycling through Kent County Council will be coming through in the next budgeting reporting arrangements. So I'm very grateful to Councillor English for passing those questions on and for the answers. I note on page 63 as the second point that it talks about the air quality monitoring action continuing through the next year. Obviously we will be changing and modifying what happens under that item on the page 63 report. We're already working on that. The third thing that I wish to point out is that the EV infrastructure has not progressed during the last reporting period. That is an issue that we're going to want to give very close attention to see progress with that. Fourthly, I have been briefed personally under my portfolio on pages 64 and 65 on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and the Rural England Prosperity Fund. It's been made clear to me how and why those allocations were made, and I've been very pleased to be part of the recent distribution of funds also under that heading. So it's good to see those things there and to learn what criteria were used for it. Fifthly, and this is a question, on page 72, item 12 in the risk assessments, it talks about the effect of IT failures. We are keen to know what the ongoing effects are of the IT failure, the CrowdStrike failure that has been advertised in the press. We're grateful to officers who've given us an update last week on what the situation was. It would be good to hear what the current issue is, particularly with regard to the welfare of our residents. If revenues and benefits have been affected, to our knowledge, are there support processes in place to look after them? I would like to know. The sixth point is that I note under risks, the explanation of risks on page 74, item 12 talks about local government reorganisation. I'm curious to know whether or not the possible loss of employment from Kent County Council in Maidstone is implied in item 12 on that item on page 74, or whether it's missing. 2 to go. On page 81 is a detailed investigation into risk management, the Kent Resilience Forum. That seems to me to be an important place for us to engage with parish councils and to raise their awareness of the ways in which the work done by Kent County Council to manage risk can be usefully and helpfully engaged with by parish councils. I've been given feedback by several parish councils that they haven't quite got the message about what is on offer in that regard, so I think it's important that we make that clear. And the last thing that I wish to highlight is that in the page of analyses of key performance indicators, while I note that there is good news and useful news and helpful insight presented in those figures, I think that many of us around this table are agreed that the, for example, percentage figures aren't particularly enlightening, and I look forward to us being able to revisit the suite of KPIs. We need more useful things. It isn't our business as Maidstone Borough Council to note that the global average surface temperature record had been broken twice in the last week at 17.09 and 17.15 degrees, but these raw figures tell us important things about what's going on around us, and Maidstone Borough Council's work needs to reflect that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I think I heard two questions in there, one on CloudStrike and one on devolution. I don't know if there were any other specific questions. I don't know. One on the KRF, yeah. Three questions in. Mark or Alison, do you want to come back on any of those?
Yeah, in relation to the question about IT issues, those haven't affected the council particularly. I mean, it was only a number of applications, so far as we're concerned, we've not seen any impact from the CrowdStrike issues last week. On the other points in the risk report about local government reforms, it doesn't refer specifically to Kent County Council. It's more of a general point about there may well be further devolution in the future with the new government. So it's just flagging up that that's something on the horizon that we need to consider. And on the point about the Kent Resilience Forum and engagement with parishes, I'm sorry to hear that parishes feel they're not aware of what's on offer, because certainly we do engage with parishes around risk management, and it's a topic that comes up regularly at the quarterly meetings that we hold with CALC. So if you've got any details of parishes who'd like our input, then please let me know.
So just a couple of things to add to what Mr. Green has said. So you will know, as all members do, I think, that we did have a number of systems impacted by the problems last week. So far as revenues and benefits are concerned, I have a regular meeting with the shared head of service for revenues and benefits. By coincidence, the latest one of those was this morning, and she has indicated that there are no ongoing problems, so everything that needed to be remedied has been. And then just something to add, so far as devolution is concerned, this is an agenda that is beginning to develop now with the new government. I think we've seen in the national news the very swift engagement with the metro mayors. The Secretary of State has written to unitary authorities and upper tier authorities that do not currently have a devolution deal in place, and invited a response including a proposition for deals as early as September. So I think in terms of that context for Kent, we need to ensure that whatever is said in response by the upper tier authority, KCC, holds good to the commitment that was made by them that there would be proper collaboration with all the councils in the county before any proposition is put forward. let's see how things unfold. And then I'd just reinforce what Mark had said vis-à-vis parish councils. From what I understand, the predominant engagement is through CALC, and we have also in the past offered support to our parishes in the preparations for emergency planning and business continuity in general, with specific reference to the current topic that is consuming energy and time at the moment, which is the introduction of the new entry-exit system arrangements at our channel ports. We have lobbied on behalf of the Maidstone parishes to make sure that they are all involved in the survey currently being conducted by the KRF, rather than the list that was originally identified of parishes who they thought might be impacted. Certainly my opinion that it's all our parishes, partly because of the diversion of traffic. So please be assured that we communicate regularly with the KRF on that topic, and wherever we can, we provide our own support.
Alison, could you just explain KRF and CALC, please, just for people watching?
Sorry. So the KRF is the Kent Resilience Forum, and CALC is the Kent Association of Local Councils, which is an alternative for expression of parish councils.
Thank you. I think KRF has added an M in there as well for Medway. It's changed its name. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, as has been stated by a number of colleagues, this is really very much a transition document. And I just really wanted to put down a marker, which I think was referred to by Councillor Thompson, that we will perhaps need to revisit some of the performance indicators, for example, to ensure that they are as meaningful as they can be. We exclude any double or triple accounting, and we just make them more as useful as they possibly can be, which is, I don't know, oxymoron with KPIs, but we will have a go. And just as some examples, I know there's been a lot of discussion in this chamber around the percentage of relevant land that is assessed as having acceptable levels of litter and so on, and kind of quite where this is taking place, because it's certainly not in my ward. But some of the others, for example, the number of trees planted and so on, is really a pretty meaningless statement, because it doesn't measure anything. There's all sorts of data available now on tree cover through Blue Sky and other packages and so on, and so there could be some really worthwhile monitoring of actually what's happening to tree cover in the borough, and we can influence that in a number of ways. But I think we can all pick holes, but I think there's a job of work here to be done, just to look at them and just tighten some of them up to make sure that we are having the best possible oversight, so that we can see hopefully improvements going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm particularly keen to see run charts in there that show historic trends. Any other questions from members? Okay. There are 6 recommendations. I assume we go through the one at a time. Number 1 is the revenue position at the end of quarter 4, 2023, including actions being taken or proposed to improve the position where significant variances have been identified. Be noted. Is that noted? Number 2, capital position at end of Q4 2023. Be noted. Is it the performance position at quarter 4 2023, including actions being taken or proposed to improve the position where significant issues have been identified. Be noted. Is that noted? That the UK Shared Prosperity Fund update attached at Appendix 3 to the report be noted. The uncollectible business rates listed in Appendix 4 to the report be approved for write-off. And the risk update attached at Appendix 5 to the report be noted. Thank you. Okay, item 18 is the medium-term financial strategy, again to be introduced by Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. The Council's medium-term financial strategy sets out in financial terms how the Council will deliver its strategic priorities. As a new strategic plan is under development, the MTFS will be developed in parallel. There are some known inputs and costs. There are also some unknown, especially in the external environment, such as government funding and potentially inflation. This report describes the issues and risks involved in preparing the MTFS and sets out a proposed timetable for agreeing budget proposals going forward, starting with the year 25-26. No assumptions are made about the outcomes from the strategic planning process. The report simply sets out the financial framework within which the strategic plan is being developed. There are scenarios to be determined. In developing a medium-term financial strategy, the Council needs to identify the risk factors that will impact delivery of its strategic priorities. The Council faces a range of risks, both internal and external. Under the circumstances, it is appropriate to plan for a number of different scenarios. Mapping the various possible outcomes also allows 4 broad scenarios to be described as set out in the report. These are generally, if the external environment is favourable, either scenario 1, we may miss the opportunities through not having the internal capability to take advantage, or scenario 2, more positively, the strategic plan priorities will be delivered successfully. If the external environment is adverse, however, scenario 3, we will make the most of the situation through a successful focus on efficiency, or scenario 4, we will have to shrink back to delivering a statutory minimum level of service. The reason for mapping different scenarios is that the Council needs to be prepared for the most adverse scenario, as in scenario 4, and make financial plans accordingly, but at the same time positioning itself to take advantage of the more favourable scenarios. Key assumptions, which are also to be determined. The report sets out the key variables in future financial planning. These are the rate of housing growth, council tax referendum limit, so that's limited by government, rate of growth decrease in business rates income, also we're subject to government decision there. Rate of growth decrease in other income, so for example, BNG, biodiversity net gain. Rate of growth increase in cost of services, which could be inflation or other, or staff and contractors, and then our ability to execute, having the bandwidth we need to do that. In addition, costs and income and their phasing may alter as a result of adopting a new strategic plan. Under these assumptions, strategic revenue projections will be prepared for each of the 4 scenarios. These may indicate a budget gap, in which case savings would need to be identified. In addition, further budget proposals are also likely to emerge from the development of the new strategic plan. In terms of timetable, the next step will be resident consultation linked with consultation on the strategic plan. Detailed work will then take place during the autumn on the medium-term financial strategy and detailed budget proposals, including informal consultation with Cabinet and the policy advisory committees, prior to coming back to the committees with formal proposals in January. In terms of recommendations, you're recommended to propose to Cabinet that it notes the issues and risks associated with updating the medium-term financial strategy, and it approves the proposed approach and timetable for the development of an updated medium-term financial strategy for 25-26 through to 2029-30, and a budget for 25-26. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Before I come to Mark, is there anything you needed to add to that? No. Okay. Councillor English.
I think it's something that this council can be proud of, that under administrations of various political colours, we have generally taken a cautious and pragmatic approach to the local authorities' finances. The key to that cautious and pragmatic approach has been having a well understood, set out framework for addressing the issues of budgeting. It may well be that it will be that this administration has in some areas different priorities than previous administrations. But the framework, as set out under option 1, is the right framework to address that change of priorities and to have the maximum consultation and engagement of members, not just from the administration but from all parties on the council in as far as one can achieve that, and the wider public. So I think there's no doubt that the option 1 to agree the framework is the right approach. Having said that, we've got a new government, many uncertainties ahead of us. Local government finance seems to be only exceeded by planning regulations in a degree of change and uncertainty that afflicts it. But that's no excuse for not getting the job started as soon as possible. So I have no hesitation in supporting the continuation of the framework that we've pursued under various administrations in the past.
Thank you. Yes, I think you've flagged up 2 key points there. One about the uncertainty with the new government, which we'll obviously have to wait and see. And secondly, around the strategic plan. And it may be, once we land that there may need to be early discussions around mini budgets and so forth. But at the moment, we're planning to work to this timetable. Are there any other questions, comments? Good. Okay, so there are 2 points here then. Firstly, that the issues and risks associated with updating the MTFS be noted. Is that noted? And secondly, the proposed approach and timetable for the development of updated medium-term financial strategy for 25-26 and 20 to 29-30 and a budget for 25-26 be approved. Is that approved? Item 19 is the Maidstone House and link decarbonisation. Councillor Summersgill, would you like to introduce this?
Thank you. As part of the Council's Biodiversity and Climate Change Action Plan, our office has sought external funding for decarbonisation works at the Council's own properties, and Maidstone House and the Link building, being the second largest emission source for the Council, was put forward, and the project was put in the Forward Capital Programme and approved by Council in February 2024. This is the next stage in that aspect. A grant from PSDS Salix amounting to £3.126 million to retrofit Maidstone House was approved in February 2024, and the main elements of the project are to change the heating, the insulation, the glazing, and put solar PV panel array on the building. The heating concept with air source heat pumps should remove gas from as a source of heating for the building. It's also intended to take advantage of this work to carry out refurbishment of the 4th floor of this building under a £300,000 grant funding from the South East Local Enterprise Partnership, CELEP, under the government's Getting Building Funding programme. The Council has instructed Calford Seedon, our consultants, as project support on this, and we had initial energy cost estimates from APSE. Calford Seedon's initial cost estimate when they came through was a project cost of £5.32 million compared to the APSE estimate of £3.775 million. So the increased budget is due to various changes in material specifications and more detailed technical advice. The proposed timetable for the works is on page 112 of your document. Planning is still to be achieved, and this is a potential delay in the project. And it should note that the funds under the Salix grant have to be expended by 31st of March this 2025. So there's possibly staged, phased aspects to achieve that drawdown by that date. This was considered by the Climate Transition Corporate and Environmental Services PAC on 24th of July, not the 4th of July, 3rd of July, I believe, and recommended that the Cabinet approve the report recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Summerskill. James, Mark, do you have anything you'd like to add? Okay. Questions from members then? Okay. Well, so there are 4 recommendations then. Capital expenditure of 5.85 million for the decarbonisation project comprising SALEX grant funding of 3.13 million and a council contribution of 2.72 million be approved. Is that approved? Number 2 is 300,000 to complete 4th floor refit works funded by the South East Local Enterprise Partnership be approved. Is that approved? Further reports be received as the project process progresses. Agreed? And the Director of Finance, Resources and Business Improvement be delegated authority to select and appoint contractors for the applicable services as necessary. Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, item 20 is natural flood management schemes. Councillor Summerskill, over to you.
Thank you. Since the major floods of 2013-14, the Council sought to take measures to reduce flood risk and increase resilience. Money has been set aside in the capital programme under the heading of Flood Action Plan, and a number of initiatives have been taken since then. Work was carried out to investigate large-scale infrastructure projects that might address flood risk, but in particular, natural flood management schemes have a twofold benefit of increasing flood resilience and supporting biodiversity and climate change. In this context, it can mean small leaky dams, new hedgerows, riverbank restoration, and targeted techniques to hold water temporarily on land to slow the flow, reduce flood peaks and store water before it can go further downstream. In 2023, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee undertook a holistic review of the entire water management cycle and recommended suitable schemes be undertaken to have a beneficial impact and multiple objectives to be achieved. A necessary first stage was to carry out feasibility work, so the Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommended to Cabinet, and it was agreed, that £100,000 be set aside from the Flood Action Plan within the capital programme for this purpose of checking out multiple objectives. Cabinet added a stipulation that funding from the Council should be matched by external funding for this project. A proposal has been developed in conjunction with the South East Rivers Trust and the Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board to scope a feasibility design and engage with landowners and then follow up with scheme implementation. This initial work will be focused on the River Sherway in Headcord and Sutton Valence Ward, as the South East Rivers Trust and the UMIDB have already started developing relationships with landowners in the Upper Belt Farmers Collective. Whilst this location will be the initial focus, if successful, it can be applied to other areas that are vulnerable to flooding, and particularly within my ward of Marden and Yolding. I shall be hoping to see some things there. The proposal set out in the appendix envisages the Council will fund the initial scoping, feasibility and design work, and the Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board will fund the scheme implementation. A schedule of dates is also included in the booklet here. So it's the £100,000 that would be allocated. This report sets out a proposal to carry out scoping, feasibility and design work costing £57,000, matched by funding from the Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board for the delivery of this initial scheme.
Thank you. James or Mark, anything you'd like to add? Okay, questions from members? Councillor English.
I think this is an excellent proposal, but although I possibly would say that, the effect of natural flood mitigation measures can be seen in a number of places around Kent, including in the Len Valley Nature Reserve in Maidstone, where such a project was carried out some years ago, and has added considerably to the resilience of that part of the town centre to flood risk. it undoubtedly has a great potential for the borough as a whole, not just in managing flood risk, but also in improving biodiversity and in strengthening habitat protection. I look forward to the days when like Canterbury, we have beavers reintroduced into Maidstone. But as you will possibly have seen from recent publicity, that this has recently occurred in Canterbury. So I've no doubt that this is something that will be very, very productive for us. Of course, I could be wrong, and that's the point of having a feasibility study and checking whether or not this is indeed the right way to go. I'm confident it is, but we have now a way of testing that.
Thank you. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very supportive, clearly, of this area of activity and this project. However, it is a relatively small project, and it's a relatively small watercourse in a small area of the borough. We have an awful lot of watercourses which are in a pretty grim condition. They are modified very significantly. They are culverted and hemmed in and covered in tarmac and all sorts of abuses. And I would not want this report to be a box ticked, and I want to ensure that all of our services and teams, if an opportunity arises, such as arose in the case in point that Councillor English raised in his ward along the River Len, where we negotiated a piece of land free of charge, essentially used borough personnel to do the work, and delivered a really good flood attenuation and nature conservation project in a very cost-effective way. I wouldn't want us to miss that. So I just really want to put a marker down that this is a holistic project, natural flood management, and we grasp any opportunity that is potentially out there, and we use our policies and our practical working activities to deliver as much as we possibly can.
Thank you. Can I ask a quick question, Councillor Summersgill? Is the Sherwell the right river to choose? Is that a reasonable one? Or are there better ones based on Councillor Harwood's comments?
Yes, it's a suitable tributary of the belt, but there are several streams that enter the belt and feed the Len, which it could apply to as well. It all depends on land use in the area as well, and the particular inclines of the ground.
Any more comments, questions? No. Okay, 3 recommendations then. Number 1 is 57,000 be allocated to scoping, feasibility and design work as set out in Appendix 1, with other measures considered over time as appropriate. Is that agreed? Number 2, Director of Finance, Resources and Business Improvement, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery, be delegated authority to conclude agreements on the terms for disbursement of the funding with South East Rivers Trust and the Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board. Is that agreed? And a review of the outcomes of the proposed work be reported to Cabinet within 12 months. Is that agreed? Excellent. Okay, item 21. Solar energy investment projects. Councillor Summersgill, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Council set ambitious goal to reach net zero emissions by 2030, with substantial financial commitments already in place. Investment in solar photovoltaic installations forms part of the capital programme for 24-25 and received final approval at Council as part of the overall budget in February 2024. The schemes totalling a 1.9 million investment in renewables and carbon offset by 2030 was proposed. Laser Energy was commissioned to assess the Council's existing solar installations and recommend areas for improvement and additional investment on 13 key Council properties, providing recommendations for reduction through solar investments and to maximise the renewable energy generated for direct use by the Council, cutting the utility bills and reducing the Council's carbon emissions with a relatively fast payback period. The primary costs associated with large-scale solar installations are often the trenching and cabling and connections to the grid rather than the units themselves. So seeking suitable rooftop space where solar can be installed that minimises connections can be the best way forward. Solar panels also require low maintenance and are a one-time investment with the long-term returns that are quiet, simple and a safe way to generate energy. Officers have been exploring the viability of various solar investment projects, and this report presents the three most viable options which were all approved by the Climate Transition Corporate and Environmental Services PAC to recommend to Cabinet to invest in capital earlier this month. They are at Loch Meadow Entertainment Complex, which has a roof providing ample space for a solar PV array, and although cinema and tenants have their own electricity supply, there's also possible opportunity for a power purchase agreement to direct wire into the distribution boards and use the excess power there. The second location is the Parkwood Depot, where the Laser Energies investigation found the existing solar array on the depot roof requires total decommissioning, cleaning and recommissioning due to being poorly and dangerously installed. Some panels may be damaged and need replacing. So while recommissioning the existing depot, there's an opportunity to increase the solar panel to more than double, triple it in fact, to a 185 kWp array. The layout is shown on the figure 2 on the document. And installation of the battery will also have numerous benefits, including the ability to charge the growing number of electric vehicles that the depot using solar energy instead of direct from the grid. The depot also being an emergency planning location for the Council, and in terms of business continuity in relation to the possibility of a future national power outage, could be enabling the depot to operate even under such conditions. The third location is not roofs, it's Moat Park car park. Some of the car parks, not the car park adjacent to the leisure centre, but the ones near in the open area of the car park. This would provide a benefit of protecting cars from the elements as well. However, due to significant shading by trees around the car park and pending decisions on the future of the leisure centre, some areas around the playground were selected for the PV installation. These are shown on figure 3. The suggested location being 350 metres away from the leisure centre would incur additional trenching and cable routing costs, but it offers a large square meterage and less shading from obstacles compared to the car park of the leisure centre. However, finding the best trenching route is vital to reduce the cost of this project, as there are several risks associated with both planning permission, with Moat Park being a Grade 2 listed place, and the route between the Moat Park and the leisure centre, where there are historical concerns of what's in the ground there. So this still requires further evaluation, and we're doing this at the moment as the result of some of the discussions held at the PAC. It's recommended that all three projects be invested in simultaneously, as combining the three projects would attract suppliers and contractors and reduce the cost for purchasing PV with a larger scale tendering process, but it may be feasible to split it into two elements, but at the moment we're hoping to tender all three in one go. All projects offer significant long-term cost savings and relatively quick payback periods between 5 and 10 years, averaging 7.6 years if all the projects are conducted under one tender, and they have the potential to offset 108 or more tonnes of equivalent carbon dioxide annually. And particularly at the depot, this enhances the Council's energy security and business continuity capabilities. As I mentioned earlier, this was considered at the PAC earlier this month and recommended that all three projects were taken forward.
Thank you, Councillor Summerskill. Any comments from officers? Anything you'd like to add? No. Okay. Any questions from members? Councillor Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to ask, with the panels going on our buildings, does that affect our building insurance in any way? As recently there was a fire up Tunbridge Road where the solar panels caught fire. And I just thought, ooh, I wonder if that affects our insurance. Is it a good thing?
Can I pass that over to...
I'm afraid I don't know, but I can take that away and check. Sorry about that.
It's just something in the news recently and in other places, and I just thought, oh, I wonder if it covers our building insurance. Does it increase or does it go down?
Yep. Are you able to answer that? Yeah, we'll come back on that. Any other questions from members? Okay, so one recommendation that investment in solar photovoltaic projects as outlined in the report be approved for Lock Meadow Entertainment Complex, Parkwood Depot and Moat Park and Leisure Centre. Is that agreed? Thank you. So, item 22, I know Councillor Russell would like to speak on this one. And I think it's me introducing it. I'm not going to say very much, other than Angela, would you... I'll introduce it. Here it is. Angela, do you want to speak to it?
Thank you, Chair. So the timetable aligns with the timetable you've seen in the earlier report for the medium-term financial strategy, that being that our strategic priorities should lead the budget. The plan does include quite an extensive period of public and member consultation. So it's the wishes of Cabinet that we do carry out public consultation, and that will be both online as well as in person. So there will be a roadshow, and we will be going out to both rural and urban locations as part of that work. And I know the Cabinet are very keen to front those sessions up and interact with the public directly. And we will be consulting with the public on the priorities that have come forward to test what they believe and what they think and what they're in favour of. And then all of that will be brought back via policy advisory committees and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and Cabinet prior to going to Council in February alongside the budget. Okay.
Thank you, Angela. Councillor Russell, did you want to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a small point, really, but quite a big point. On 6.1, it says about the various consultation activities, including resident stakeholder and member engagement throughout, informally and formally. However, in the planning timetable at 3.3, it doesn't really mention specifically member engagement, and the only thing that sort of says members is when it gets to the PACs in January 2025. So it might be, if the Cabinet were minded, it could be addressed easily by adding into the August to September section where it says resident and stakeholder. Maybe could that be amended to resident, stakeholder and member consultation and engagement on strategic plan and budget? Because I think an early engagement would be really welcomed, because by the time it gets to the PACs, it will be split up into the separate bits that relate to that pack, and then we'll only come back together as one for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and that would then be right at the end of the timetable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I think that's a sensible suggestion. I'm happy to move a small amendment to the papers. Councillor English seconded. Are there any other comments from members?
Yes, so I was just to respond to Councillor Russell's point. I think it's a really good one, but I think just bearing in mind we're towards the end of July already and August is almost amongst us, I think a good opportunity to do that would be in the October to December timeframe, running a parallel process.
Thank you. I'm advised that we can do it in September. So let's do it in September, earlier rather than later. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With reference to pages 136 and 137 of this item, I have learnt recently that the text in the table of cross-cutting issues and implications, which I believe should be headed corporate planning timetable at the top of 136, are up for our input. With that in mind, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to some modification of the language in this section in ways which, while not spilling the beans on what the programme is, nevertheless shows that the way we are doing things in the Council is indeed the different sorts of constructive things that we committed to. So in cross-cutting objectives, I would like to see enhanced rather than respected to show that we're actually setting out to make progress in that regard. For risk management, I think it should be clear that the second sentence should begin, this assessment will need to be reviewed once the new plan has been agreed. As I stated in my earlier remarks, Mr. Chairman, what the real risks are that we are setting out to tackle in our programme needs to be shown in our planning. I welcome that in the financial section it says that the medium-term financial strategy will need to be aligned with the strategic priorities rather than the other way around. So I welcome the phraseology that is there and approve that very much. Whereas, particularly with a view to my portfolio, the public health section, I would very much like to see stated positively, rather than we recognise that the recommendations will not negatively impact on public health and or that of individuals. I would rather that it did in some way set out to show that our work with the West Kent Health and Wellbeing Board being set up in close collaboration with district councils should show that we have positive ambitions in that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Let no one ever accuse you of never reading papers. I think you know, you've made some very good points. A lot of this will evolve over time. We can take new templates, and I'd hope we will take new templates through DG Democracy and General Purposes Committee at some point. Clearly, the strategic objectives will be updated, and you're right in terms of things like the public health. When we start to talk about how we about donut economics, which I've mentioned at a council meeting a couple of months ago, it's all about how we improve that social need, not just ensure that it gets worse. So yes, your points are well made. Any other questions, points from members? Cool. There is the recommendation on here is that the as amended by us earlier, thank you, Councillor Russell, that the corporate planning timetable included at item 3.3 be approved. Is that approved? Thank you. Okay, item 23 is the Council House Building Programme. Councillor Wales, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. This item relates to the proposed acquisition of a town centre brownfield site which delivers 23 units with easy access to local transport links and amenities. The site has an outline planning application granted in 2015 as a part of a wider permission to deliver 65 homes over 3 phases. This phase, phase 2, has no requirement for the provision of affordable homes and consists of 19 houses and 4 one-bed maisonettes. The report covers the acquisition on the basis of delivering 19 homes as affordable rent and the 4 maisonettes as market rent. The 4 maisonettes are currently slightly under the required size to qualify for grant funding. However, post-acquisition, officers will look to increase the size of the maisonettes, if possible, to deliver all units as affordable rent. There is also, this was discussed in the pack last night, and because we followed on very closely from one meeting to another, and it was very much of the opinion that the council should not be building properties that were below the standards. We would want to set an example of good house building. So within the scope, bearing in mind that if we're not careful, this could make the project unviable, but we do need to make sure that we are building properties of the correct size. Also, to deliver as much green space as possible in the development, because again, in a town centre environment, we want to make sure that it's a more pleasant place to live, or as pleasant a place to live as possible. All units have at least one car parking space, with a number of houses being provided with EV charging points, and there are further EV charging points around the development, not attached to properties. And it is this excess of parking places which could make way for more green space. Homes England grant funding will be applied for post-acquisition. This is standard procedure to assist in the cost of delivering these units as affordable housing. Phase 3, confusingly, which is 24 apartments, Phase 3 preceded Phase 2 and was acquired by Maidstone Borough Council in 2023, and we are on site currently with the units being delivered as social rent. So the whole development will be a mixture of social rent and affordable rent. This proposed acquisition provides Maidstone Borough Council with a good opportunity to acquire a number of houses with parking in a town centre location and provide high quality living accommodation, providing we address the two matters that I raised. So I commend this report to the Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Obviously, I should have mentioned, if we do need to go into, want to discuss any of the details in the exempt appendices, then we will need to go into a private session, but I'm hoping that we can manage it without that. That will be helpful in terms of transparency. Councillor English, I can see you indicating.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think it would be unfortunate, to say the least, that if the council were to build the masonettes to the original specification, because we are currently refusing, quite rightly, many planning applications at our planning committee of properties that do not meet the national space standards. And the only reason this is where it is because the application was approved some time ago, so it's a rather historic legacy. I think it is eminently possible to develop a scheme on this site, looking at the layout of the site, which does not do that. I think the wording here is a little weak in terms of explore the possibility. I think we should be giving a bit of a stronger steer to that. Obviously, if it's absolutely impossible to do that, then that's we're in that position. And it does say that if the scheme were undeliverable, but then it would come back for further consideration. I think we need to be fairly clear that we are looking for housing of a suitable standard here, and not something that we ourselves would certainly not want to have. So I think the recommendation is option 2. I agree with, but I think that the wording's a little weak. So I'll ask the Cabinet Member for Housing how he would like to take that forward, really.
Councillor Wells, I think that question was to you.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, that's why I stated in my comments at the beginning that we would be making sure that these maisonettes were not substandard in size, and to increase the green space. And yes, if we suitably amend the recommendations, then that would be fine.
So I'm assuming you are proposing an amendment to option 2, which moves the wording from to away from explored to ensure that minimum standards. And is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor English.
If that's acceptable to the Cabinet Member for Housing, I'd be very happy if we went ahead with a stronger recommendation.
Okay. Can we, Philip, do you want to give us some advice on that?
Yeah, I just want to make clear, obviously, this will be subject to planning, so that's outside of my control, but obviously we will make every endeavour to approach the planning department and via the normal procedures for making applications. So we'll obviously do all that, but it would be down to the planning committee on the evening to determine whether we can deliver that. But we will obviously make every effort to do so.
Point noted, but obviously you can't ensure an outcome of a planning application, but best endeavours, as they say.
I mean, I do think whilst we can't ensure the outcome of a planning application, we can request that the plans reflect the will of the Cabinet, that the planning application reflects the will of the Cabinet. I think there's some... Councillor Harwood.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think we need to get the wording right with all the caveats around the planning process. However, I think what the Cabinet is stating is really a kind of statement of intent that when we deliver housing schemes, we consider not just the numbers, but we also consider the quality very significantly. And I think in terms of an urban situation such as this, building in some green space to make it a more pleasant community and to cool and soften what can be quite a hard landscaped area, that part of Tunbridge Road is important. And we've already talked about the accommodation size, but I think going forward, all of the projects that we support being advanced by the Borough Council will need to deliver the communities and not just houses. Thank you.
Okay, so I think before you come to a conclusion on adding a recommendation, and I think that's what you're doing, rather than changing the body of the report, you need to make sure that you're making an explicit decision with a clear, I think you're adding a recommendation. Mm-hmm. But I think that in advance of that, it would be helpful if Philip was able to advise you as to whether or not that is practical at this location. So you've heard advice already concerning the masonettes. I think you need additional advice as to whether there is the scope in practice to have alternative use for some of the space around the buildings. And then you need to put forward your additional recommendations so that you're being explicit in your decision and it's not simply changing the body of the report. So if we could have the advice, please, on green space. Yeah. First.
Obviously, the site already has an outline application. We can look at providing additional green space. I have looked at or addressed obviously what would happen to viability if we were to reduce or to not build the maisonettes. Again, it would be down to the planning department, but at the moment, obviously the report highlights how we'd like to move forward with a recommendation, and then post-acquisition we will obviously explore all of the avenues that the members have discussed. But again, yeah, I can't guarantee at this stage, but I will work with everyone to look at options post-acquisition.
Thank you, Philip. Councillor Harwood.
Yes, so essentially, I think we just need to, in our recommendation, to actually just outline the fact that we will require green space and will require the NDS space standard to be met. If that cannot be met, then there would need to be need to come back to us, I presume. But regardless of the negotiations with the planners, I think it's a bottom line coming from the Cabinet.
Okay, Philip, do you want to come back?
Sorry, we have a sort of a short window of opportunity here to acquire the site. It is off market at the moment. If we don't move forwards with it, and it will be offered to the market. So I'm obviously bringing it forwards on the basis of the report that you've seen tonight. And again, a short sort of window of opportunity with working within the timescales of the developer. So I can't. I'm not in a position at the moment to guarantee. And I've obviously looked at options, and I've provided some options in the report, which shows what would happen if we didn't build the maisonettes. But we don't have lots of time to obviously go off and consult with the planning department at this time.
Thank you. I don't think we're suggesting not building the maisonettes. We're just suggesting they need to be built to minimum standards.
So I think I've said in the report that I can go away and I can recommend, or I can ask them to be built to the NDSS requirements, but it would be in the hands of the planning department to be able to decide whether that is achievable or not. Likewise with the green space, the site is the site. It obviously is delivering green space. We can look at greening up and planting more trees, or as I've said in the report, that we can look at not building the maisonettes, but that does have an effect on the viability, which again I've outlined on the report.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you. Just to clarify, the way I heard Councillor Harwood's comment is that we would provide a requirement that green space was installed and the NDSS standards met, but if not, to come back to Cabinet for further discussion.
Okay, Philip, did you want to come back?
Yeah. I suppose at this stage we obviously have a small window of opportunity to be able to acquire the site. I don't have the time to go away and to consult with the planning department. They're obviously in the plans. We have green space provided as part of the original outline application. But at this stage I can't see where we can provide additional green space unless we lose car parking. So I can't give you the reassurance at this stage that we can deliver these. It'd be remiss of me to say we can deliver these, and then obviously further down the line, or it turns out that I can't. But I would provided kind of an alternative, and I will use all endeavours with your input and with all the councillors' input to be able to do that. But I can't guarantee that we can provide more green space than has already been provided in the outline application or on the plans at the moment, nor can I guarantee that we can deliver those units as to NDSS requirements. We will obviously do everything we can in our powers to do that, or we could not build them if that is an option, and I have looked at those, but it does reduce viability of the scheme.
Thank you. I really don't want to be in a position where we're building stuff that is unviable, and unviable for me is social and environmental as well as financial. Councillor Harwood, I think you were suggesting
just come back. I mean, there is an outline permission. I mean, but the detailed application will need to deliver on the specifics that we talked about. So I don't see where that's getting in the way of any purchase, because I think the Cabinet has agreed that it's a good idea to do the deal. I think that there will be negotiations and discussions later about the detailed planning application. And I think within the detailed planning application, just looking at myself, there is a bank of parking, a triangular bank, which could be a decent green space for the community. You can always reorganise the room sizes, and I'm sure we can get around the issue. It may reduce a unit, a masonette less or something, and there may be a small hit on the viability, but I think that can all be bottomed out further down the line.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assuming that conversation is completed, and it may not be, can I just ask on page 141, recommendation 4, for clarification of the rather large number in the final sentence? I suspect that while this room is big enough to accommodate the number of officers mentioned, it probably doesn't mean 50.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. How many officers? Okay, it's just then, so that 50 is just shouldn't be there at all. Good, okay. So I'm hearing that the Cabinet wants to ask officers to ensure that the masonettes meet minimum standards and that the planning application contains appropriate green space. And that will be another recommendation in the list. You're seconding that, or are you wanting to speak on it?
If I just, yes, to suggest that the recommendation should be that we should seek to maximise the green space by available means, either considering the parking spaces or the other spaces around the site. Having made the purchase, I suggest we should proceed with the purchase, but seek to maximise the green space and to ensure that the size of the maisonettes conforms to standards, having made the purchase.
Okay, and I've seen that seconded. Okay. Alison, do you want to come in?
So just to confirm that if we're in control of the site, we can submit a reserved matters piece of paperwork to planning. So far as you are concerned, you are the corporate client. You are saying what you want to be achieved on this site if we own it. What the planning committee then do is a separate matter altogether. Yeah. So this is a point, just to be very pedantic, that we have made on a large number of occasions in advising you up until this point, that you as the client for this site wish to pursue a development of a particular content, and then it's a completely separate matter what the planning committee do. Having decided that, then we'll advise you later on any potential conflict of interest that you have for any of you that are part of the planning committee. But you've given instructions now to the new business team about what you want achieved on this site.
Thank you. So I think that's clear. So in terms of that first recommendation that I think was proposed by Councillor Wales and seconded by Councillor English, are we agreed around the masonette and green space per the discussion? 4 other recommendations, therefore. Is there any other discussion? No. So 4 other recommendations in the report. Firstly, the financial returns for the proposed acquisition as shown in exempt Appendix 3 to the report, which supports housing development and regeneration investment plan and overall development strategy, be approved. Is that approved? Secondly, delegated authority be given to the Director of Finance, Resource and Business Improvement to A, negotiate terms for the purchase of the proposed acquisition for the sum as shown in Appendix 3 to the report, B, procure and enter into all such deeds, agreements, contracts and documents which may be required to facilitate the purchase of the site and subsequent redevelopment of works required to deliver a scheme referred to in this report, including but not limited to any related appointments such as suitably qualified consultants and a contractor, and C, subject to satisfactory conclusion of all due diligence to negotiate and finalise and complete all legal formalities, deeds and agreements which may be required to facilitate the purchase. Is that agreed? Thirdly, the head of Mid-Kent Legal Services be authorised to appoint the solicitors required to negotiate and complete the necessary contract documentation, deeds and agreements associated with the purchase and construction works on the terms as agreed by the Director of Finance, Resources and Business Improvement. Is that agreed? And finally, it be agreed post-completion of the procurement process to appoint a contractor for the works cost detailed in the financial summary at exempt Appendix 3 to the report, if In the event that tenders for the works cost are in excess of the agreed sum, then officers will return to the committee cabinet to seek further approval to the development itself commencing. Is that agreed? Excellent. I think that concludes this evening's meeting. I declare this meeting closed. Thanks, everybody.